Hello. Today is the third in our ongoing series discussing movement within the mortgage industry. With me is my partner, Gary Remer.
Thank you, Marty.
So, Gary, in our prior episodes, we had a discussion about movement within the mortgage industry from an employee or employer perspective.
Okay.
Today, we're going to talk about from a merger and acquisition perspective. So from company A acquiring company B or company A selling to company B. We're going to talk about due diligence.
Okay.
What is due diligence from a merger and acquisition perspective?
Well, what due diligence really is finding out what you're buying. The business people come in, they find the shiny new toy being a great target acquisition, and we want to understand exactly what is underneath the hood, for lack of a better term. What you want to do in the due diligence process is look at such things as what type of real estate do they own, what kind of underlying litigation is there, intellectual property, contract rights, employment issues. And those are really some broad stroke ideas of the types of things you're looking at because you're buying a complete package and you want to understand the good as well as the bad to make your final decision as to whether you want to acquire that business.
Because I need to know that or confirm that I'm getting from an acquirer's perspective what I think I'm getting.
Exactly. On the surface, you may make the assumption that I'm acquiring this wonderful thing, but you come to find out that there's some questionable accounting practices, that they're very costly software contracts that you're dealing with. Maybe there's owners or employees that have rights to equity that can impact the deal.
Let's talk about one subclass of assets in this an M&A transaction. Talk to us about business and domain names.
Okay, it's a great question. You know, a lot of times when you're buying a business, it's the brand you're buying as well. It's got value in the community, value across the country. You want to make sure that you have a superior right to the name, the domain name, and everything that goes along with that to make sure that you're getting the benefit of the bargain.
Are there special considerations surrounding transfer of business and domain names?
There are. You know, quite often in a sophisticated business, everything is owned by the company. The domain names, they've registered their trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. But other times, a lot of these businesses started off as small operations. And you might find out that really the original founder owns title to all of the intellectual property. So those are things that you need to consider in making sure that all those rights are transferred at the time of closing.
How might, as we know, the mortgage industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country. How might the regulatory landscape impact an acquisition?
It could mean everything in a transaction, such as the one you're describing. You know, it's highly regulated, both at the state and federal level. You need to find out whether there's underlying investigations that are ongoing that might not be public knowledge. Have there been complaints made that might show a history of noncompliance? You want to make sure that things take place or haven't taken place, such as data breaches that might not be public knowledge, anything that could impact the license or impact the tickets with both a state or federal regulator. I mean, all of these things come into play. And, you know, it's not as simple as somebody sued you for a slip and fall. You have major consequences if there's a data breach when you're dealing with consumer information.
There are, with an operating business, so we're talking about acquired company. Acquired company has all kinds of contracts with third parties to allow it to operate, from maybe a PEO to a copy service for software, etc. Talk to us about the importance of those contracts from the acquirer's perspective.
Okay. To begin with, all of those contracts, any one what we call major contracts that impact the day-to-day operations of the business or have major economic terms. But I really kind of like to focus on one in particular because of this particular industry, and it's dealing with the software. It's a very sophisticated, complicated structure, and quite often these large enterprises have spent a lot of money to develop very specialized software to not only satisfy what their business needs are, but to be in compliance with the regulatory agencies. So you need to look at whether those contracts are assignable, for example. Is there an early termination clause in those if you no longer need those? Also, what about all that data you've gathered? Is it something that you can readily transfer to somebody else's system, being the purchasers, or are you going to be stuck maintaining two separate systems as you're transitioning everything over and trying to figure out how to export that data into another facility or another system? So when I say that, to me, it's one of the most critical pieces is looking at that alone that could be astronomical in cost for various different reasons.
In addition to, obviously, those software issues, which are, I agree with you, are significant drivers of these deals, I would be remiss if we didn't also talk about if I am buying a physical location within a particular state or city, and there are existing leases.
Correct.
Don't I also have to dig into whether those leases are assignable to the extent they continue?
No question, any type of contract, especially in the real estate context, because as we talked about, high dollar value. Besides that, your big costs are traditionally employees, benefits, and then real estate. So when you look at those costs, you do need to see if you can take over the lease. Is it assignable? Do you want to take over the lease? Because one of the advantages of M&A is at times avoiding duplication of efforts. Do I need two accounting departments or can I consolidate into one? I might not need as large of a footprint. Can I get out of that lease?
You mentioned in that answer that you just gave, which was great, was the importance of key employees within the acquired company.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about the importance of those key employees post-acquisition.
Of course. Part of when you buy a business, you kind of look at it that it's an operation, but who are those key individuals that make it hum? Do you have key originators, key salespeople, key executives who have a lot of historic knowledge about the business? Quite often I see that one of the conditions of closing on an M&A transaction is that you're able to bring over those key employees. Because if you don't, there's a lot of goodwill and value lost in what you're purchasing. So you need to look at what type of agreements may or may not be in place with those executives or key salespeople. What happens upon the sale? Do they have agreements that are assignable? Also, you may want to look if they have equity options too, because one of the other things we look at with employees is, can somebody throw a wrench in the deal? And if, for example, you're selling all of the stock or membership interest in the entity, have you promised equity to one of these key employees? Because it might be, as opposed to them just being a key employee, when the business is sold, they might have a nice 7-figure or even 8-figure payday because they were promised equity.
It sounds to me that, and you've given us a good overview, but there are a lot of other risks that we've not touched upon, isn't that right?
Yeah, this is just scratching the surface. We have to look at, such things as going through this on a regular basis, is, loan pipelines. Are there profit and loss arrangements with your team members? As I mentioned, the equity component of everything. Are there outstanding tax liabilities? I mean, especially post-COVID, we're still fighting over tax credits that people used to receive. So there's a lot of things that are very specific to the mortgage industry, and there are a lot of like broader scope issues that we haven't even scratched the surface on. I think the one key takeaway from this discussion, though, is, you need to truly understand what you're buying. Step one is saying you're interested in the project, the business, the people. The next step is saying, does it make economic sense to do it? And what's associated with that? What I like to tell people when you're looking to buy a house, it's the same thing. It's the due diligence on a smaller scale. If there's a leak on the roof, can you live with it? If there's a data breach, can you live with it? Those are business decisions, and what we try to do is help bring those out and let everybody discuss it and make an educated decision on whether to proceed or not.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Marty.
Well, that's it for today. In our fourth and final episode, we will discuss post-closing risks in an acquisition.